All right, we're going to get started. Welcome, good morning, everyone, welcome to the Michigan Healthy Climate Workgroup Recommendation Listening Session. This is the first of two listening sessions we got going on. The second one is tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock. This is the first one. My name's Jim Ostrowski. I work in Eagle's Environmental Support Division, and I'm going to help moderate today's session. And as we move through presentation and comments, so you'll be hearing from me off and on today. Just got a couple logistical things to go through. First of all, at this time, all lines are muted. And to let you know, we are recording this session. As we get to the comments part of today, I will explain how to submit your comments after our presentation. But to request a comment, a lot of you during your registration requested the comment, and we'll be going through those people first. If you didn't put yes on request a comment in your registration, don't worry, we can still take your comment. You're just going to raise your hand, and we'll go through those as well. So with that, that's all logistical details I have. So I'm going to turn it over to James Cliff. So James, if you're there, take it away.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Really welcome everyone who's joined us this morning. We appreciate you taking the time to get your comments in on kind of how we're going to go here. At this point, I think Jim is going to stop sharing his screen so that I or Kimber can share my screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk you through really quickly, 5 minutes on kind of procedurally where we are in the process, just so you know kind of what to expect when. So if you go to the next slide, Kimber, thanks. The Council on Climate Solutions was established pursuant to an executive order by the governor, an executive directive, and they're basically assisting Eagle in the preparation of the My Healthy Climate Plan. Really looking at and trying to identify those opportunities to do carbon emission reduction strategies in Michigan, and make sure we do it in a way that we, sensitive to kind of the equity question of, is it impacting certain communities disproportionately than others, kind of going forward. Next slide. This kind of shows you how we've kind of set up our process. And the council itself has, I think, 5 state department directors on it, plus a number of people from the private sector, academia, nonprofit agencies kind of assisting us in preparing this plan. What we did to begin with is we kind of broke the topics that we were going to address into 5 kind of working groups, and those you see at the bottom of the screen here: energy production, building and housing, transportation and mobility, natural working lands, and energy intensive industries. They have been working over the last 6-8 months preparing recommendations, and those recommendations have been brought before the council at this point. Those recommendations can be found on the website for the Council on Climate Solutions, and we'll have kind of a very abbreviated shorthand version of them coming up here in just a minute. But the council has been discussing each of those sets of recommendations. We have a couple of more meetings kind of coming up here where we're going to be kind of discussing them as a whole as we start to put this draft plan together. So we're really at just the stage now of Eagle putting the draft plan together. We're going to start with an outline and then move toward a draft plan. Timing wise, we expect we'll have a draft plan by early mid-January. The council will look at that one more time in January. That will go out for another public comment period, and then a finalized plan will be sent to the governor in mid-March. The work groups have involved, I think, total, almost 500 people. All of them met a number of times to come up with their recommendations. And on each one, they were supposed to kind of tell us, what's the relative impact of those recommendations, talk to us about the strategies of how to get there, and really looking at that short-term window. What does Michigan have to do first? What needs to happen in the next 5 to 9 years to make sure that we're going to meet those 2050 climate goals? Because we think that is critically important. We have had also the assistance of the the MAC-EJ, the Advisory Council on Environmental Justice, and the Office of Future Mobility of the state, kind of helping us with kind of some of the issue areas as we kind of move through our work. The next slide here. Just this is kind of the really shorthand table now of kind of all of our recommendations. Again, all of these recommendations can be found on the website now, but it kind of tells you kind of the very kind of broad breadth of concepts that we're looking at to move forward with the My Healthy Climate Plan, and deciding at this point really which ones do we highlight, which ones come first, which ones need to come first because the other ones kind of build upon kind of what's in them. There's some duplication between recommendations, so we're kind of looking at all those topics. But next slide, really important, kind of looking at, where does that carbon come from at the moment? Like most places in the country now, transportation has taken over as the #1 sector where our carbon emissions are coming from. Followed closely by electric production still, then energy intensive industries, agriculture, and then the commercial and residential buildings. So really kind of a wide diversity of resources that you need to tackle. So it's kind of no one thing is going to get you kind of across the finish line. So it is going to be a suite of recommendations that are going to help Michigan achieve its goal. Next slide. What we're really trying to be sensitive to is the fact of, as you do this, let's do it in a way that we try to minimize kind of unintended impacts. Let's recognize that, hey, as we move down this road, and we are moving, regardless of what the state does, we are moving down this road today of, kind of major changes in the way we produce electricity, the electricity that businesses are demanding, be greener and greener. So these changes are occurring. How can the state kind of help manage those changes in a way that will minimize kind of disruptions? Where might people be? Which industries might shrink, and therefore people lose their job? Is there retraining opportunities available? What industries might grow? And therefore, where can we do job training to provide folks, job opportunities moving forward? Where might we have impacts in, particular communities regarding kind of both the carbon emissions, but also a lot of times there's other emissions that come with it. Where are those going to be reduced? Where might we see improvements to public health? And where can we help people kind of join in our efforts kind of going forward? So I'm going to stop there, really kind of appreciate kind of what everyone's done. Now, for people who want to provide oral comments today, we'll be taking notes. But then if you want instead to provide written comments, to the extent possible, the more specific, the better for us at this point. These are all the emails for the various kind of groupings of recommendations. And to the extent that you're just interested in one area, feel free to go right to that area and provide your comments there in written form. We'll be reading all of those. All of those websites that you see here on the screen are also available on the website. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim so we can listen to what you have to say.
Hey, thanks, James. And hey, Kimber, can you bring that slide back up again? I want to leave that up there for a few minutes, if you don't mind. Just put it up there. I want to make sure everybody gets that, and possibly maybe we can put that in the chat, those comments, so people can have those email addresses. Yeah, thanks. And I want to introduce Kimber Francis here as well. She's going to be helping me with co-hosting and making sure we get everybody up here for comment. And so Kimber, if you don't mind maybe putting in those emails into the chat for people, that would be good. So, okay, I'm gonna bring my screen back here then after Kimber's done. So a couple things regarding, let me bring my slide back up. There we go. All right, so a couple things regarding the listening session today and comments, because this is really our time for comment. When you registered, a lot of you had the option to indicate whether or not you wanted to make a comment, or you also could have emailed us. We've got a list of you all here, and so what we're going to do is take your comments first if you pre-registered. So be ready. We'll call your name. And Kimber's going to put in the chat, if you look in the chat, kind of a who's on deck. So you'll know, who's being called up. And then if you're on deck, just be ready, because when I call your name, what I'm going to do is unmute your mic, and you'll see something pop up that says to unmute, and you can then start with your comment. If you don't mind, when you do your comment, please repeat your name and any association that you're affiliated with, if you are. And what we're going to do today, because we've got, I think, like 90 some people logged in right now, and 20 to 30 people, I think, have already said they want to comment. So we got a lot of people to get through today and listen to comments. So please limit your comment to 3 minutes if you would. And I'm going to do my best to track time. So I'll let you know when you got about a minute left. And you can just do your best to kind of wrap your comment up. Remember, if you have more extensive comments, you can submit them via writing to the email addresses that we're dropping in the mailbox. So please do that if you feel you have more extensive comments that you can get out today. James is going to be on here listening with us, and Kimber's helping out. So I guess what I'm going to do is have Kimber call up the first person. So Kimber, who do we got first on our list of people that requested to comment?
First on that list is Bruce Woodry.
All right, Bruce, I do see your name here. So I'm going to unmute your line, Bruce, and you should see something pop up, and you should be able to unmute your line. Bruce, do you hear us? I see you're there, and I just unmuted your line, or you should be able to unmute your line. It allows you to unmute. So all right, so I guess maybe Bruce is having trouble. So Kimber, I'm going to have you go to the next person. Who's that?
The next person is Ann Pauley.
All right, and Ann, I have allowed you to unmute, so you should be able to see your microphone.
Right.
There you go.
I believe I'm unmuted. I'm not really certain this is, maybe I could submit these via email. I have two concerns that the state seems to have put hurdles in place to bring us to net zero. And the first is the limitation, the cap put on home solar plants, especially in the UP, because I believe they've met their cap. Are there plans to roll these back? And that's the first one. My second concern is, how do we convince municipalities to roll back their square footage requirements that frequently requires really large homes being built, when, you know, an 8-foot, 900 square foot home would suffice for a lot of people? How do we handle that? And in a way is to kind of like limit our footprint as well. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Ann, for your comment today. Who's up next?
Alison Sutter.
Okay, Allison, look for you, and I am going to allow you to unmute, so you can go ahead.
All right, good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
I appreciate the opportunity to provide some comments. I'm Alison Sutter. I am the Sustainability and Performance Management Officer with the City of Grand Rapids. And so just really wanted to take a moment to thank Governor Whitmer for taking the lead on this work, as well as EGLE. This is really important work in embedding actions on climate change across the entire state government organization and economy. That is paramount and instrumental. So appreciate that. Really just wanted to take a minute to emphasize how important this work is to the City of Grand Rapids. And I did forget in my introduction, I am also one of the members of the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice as well. So just wanted to share that in alignment, this work is really important to the City of Grand Rapids. We are leading with equity in this work, and I really want to be specific that we are leading with racial equity. And a couple things that I have some concerns about and want to share is that, you know, it's very difficult to lead with equity if people don't know where the greatest disparities exist, and ensure that everyone who's involved in the process and creating the plan has a robust understanding of how, you know, state, local, federal policies, practices, and processes have created systemic systemic and institutional racism. I feel, and we're working very hard here. It takes time. I understand that within governments, but really want to encourage the state to be looking at compensating and elevating comments and needs of our BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and people of color members in our state, with this recognition that systemic and institutional racism have kept those voices suppressed over time. And agree with some others around the comments that environmental justice communities really need to be prioritized in terms of looking to directly reduce the energy burden in those communities, as well as emissions for communities of color, and looking at specific goals to deploy clean energy resources in frontline communities, similar to the Justice 40 initiative at the state level. And so just so the state is aware, we have recently done our own Grand Rapids municipal reduction goal of we're looking at 85% reduction by 2030 with net zero by 2040. Feeling that we need to be moving faster on these initiatives. We've achieved a 30% reduction and expect a 47% reduction by 2025 with some of our projects. I also just want to let the state know we've been pushed very hard, and our commissioners, constituents have expressed a desire to go even faster and for the city to set a community-wide carbon emissions goal of net zero by 2030. And so we are looking at if the city's going to make that decision, we're having conversations with constituents across the community right now and hope to make a decision by September of next year, whether that's something that the city will be looking at. But I want to stress that I think it's extremely important that we need to understand who's going to be paying to achieve these goals and who will be accountable to achieve these goals. I'm very concerned all across the country, people are coming out with goals, and kudos actually to Ann Arbor. They're one of the only places that I have seen actually document how much it would cost to achieve establishing these goals. And I have concerns about setting goals are they realistic? Can we achieve them? And who's going to pay for them and who's going to be held accountable for them? Because obviously government organizations can only do so much. So we're going to need a lot of partnerships. A few other things that I just want to share.
3 minutes. So can you just wrap it up? Thanks.
Sure. Will do. Yep. I'll submit some written comments too. I just want to emphasize, I think we should be focusing on climate adaptation, not too much focus on carbon reduction. And I really think that buildings and housing is a key area where we can be leading with equity. And I'll be happy to submit our team's other comments to you in written form. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Allison, for your comment. And I'm sorry I had to cut you off, but we do have like a lot of people that we got to get through. So unfortunately, we got to have a time limit for comments. So appreciate you submitting your comments in writing too. Just for those who joined a little bit late, what we're doing is going through first a list of people who requested a comment ahead of time during the registration. And Kimber's putting those names on deck in the chat so you can be ready. Also, after we go through those, I see a few people have raised their hands. Don't worry, we'll get to you if you raise your hands after we get through this initial list. So, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes at the most. Appreciate that. So, Kimber, who's up next?
We have Casey Adams.
All right, I see Casey here, and oh, where'd she go? There she is. Hold on. All right, Casey, I've unmuted you can unmute your line now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
And yeah, I'm actually not a girl, but think so.
I apologize for that.
It's okay. I get it all the time. I just wanted to say that I thought the My Healthy Climate Plan was really well done. There are a lot of really good policy solutions in there. But two areas that I wanted to bring to Eagle's attention. There's a website called drawdown.org that has a large list of different policy options for addressing climate change. And two of the areas that they didn't seem to like be going much into on Eagle's website were refrigerant management and silvopasture. Refrigerant management would involve some sort of a regulation of different chemicals used in the air conditioning and refrigeration process. There's a lot of action at the federal level to try to address this. And it's a really like low-hanging fruit for lowering emissions because the hydrofluorocarbons that come out of air conditioners and refrigerants are about 600 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. And then silvopasture would involve planting trees on cattle ranches, which would act as a land sink for different carbon emission problems. I thought that those two areas were something that the state could look into from a regulatory perspective. I'm not sure how much the executive office of the governor can do on these two areas, but it's worth looking into as part of the overall climate plan. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Casey. And again, I apologize for that. I usually am good at that. And I have three screens open right here and just misspoke, so apologize. Next person we have up, Kimber, is who?
Ellen Vial, V-I-A-L.
All right, Ellen, I've allowed you to unmute, so you can go ahead.
Cool. Hi. Thank you everyone for having me, and big thank you to the Council on Climate Solutions and all the work groups for all the work that you guys have put into this process. I just want a few things to say today, just to really impress upon Eagle as you guys move into this healthy climate full report plan, how vital it is to consider how the recommendations from all the work groups will work together. And I would strongly encourage conducting some sort of study to analyze how implementing various work group recommendations will track us against our 2030 and 2050 climate goals. Just because if we don't, if we take the sort of lightest recommendation from each of the work groups, for example, if we subsidize EVs, but we don't electrify the grid, we won't make it very far against those goals. And it will, I think, unfortunately create a situation where, like Alison was talking about, green energy for some and old dirty energy for others. And so, yeah, I also just want to emphasize some of the work group recommendations that came up, especially investing in zero emission transportation options, such as walking and biking, making our communities more walkable, preserving natural lands and wetlands that we already have instead of destroying them and trying to create new ones. And lastly, expanding behind the meter options and removing this distributed generation cap, which will be extremely vital to making clean energy more affordable and accessible through our state. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks for your comment. Next up.
Jack Schroeder.
Okay, Jack, you should be able to go ahead. Jack, if you're there, just gotta unmute your mic and you can make your comment. All right, well, we can, if you come back and decide you want to comment, you can raise your hand later. So next up is who?
Louise Gorenflow.
Okay, and just to let you know, I gotta scroll through a list of names here to find the person to unmute, so it might take a sec.
It's Gorenflo.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Louise. You should be able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Great. Louise Gorenflow in Ann Arbor. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to present these brief comments, and also thank all of you for your service in developing in this climate action plan. The first point I would like to discuss is under the Natural Working Lands and Forest Products Work Group, which are very thoughtful and well considered. I suggest the use of the term agroecology to clearly define the agricultural practices that have demonstrated their value in restoring soils that have lost their fertility from overuse of machinery and from the removal of organic material and excessive use of fertilizers. And another point is, in order to promote these sustainable farming practices, I suggest that the state of Michigan adopt and implement a good food purchasing practices for its food purchases. This would allow the state to establish a transparent, clear foundation for tracking the state food purchases, and it would also entail educating to the people of Michigan the values of good food purchasing and drive positive changes across the local, regional, and Michigan food system. While several cities large cities, including New York City, have adopted such a good food purchasing policy, the state of Michigan could become a leader in implementing this statewide. And another point is that researchers have repeatedly found that a plant-forward diet shift would reduce GHG emissions dramatically and would reduce the incidence of such major metabolic diseases such as obesity and diabetes. And really the only thing that state of Michigan needs to do is to promote the USDA healthy food diet by seeing that there's a sufficient variety and amount of food for all Michigan residents be produced in Michigan that reflect these guidelines. And finally, under is a comment around the equity issue. I recommend that a climate plan equity group comprised of people of color be formed to review the recommendations made by the task groups, and through the remaining process of developing the climate action plan, to review the recommendations using a lens of equity for all people in Michigan, and that this group would be composed of Indigenous people, Blacks, and other people of color. Such a group also needs to remain active through the implementation of the plan to ensure that historic and current patterns of discrimination, injustice, and exclusion do not persist. The climate action plan must be for all the people of Michigan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your comment. Next up, Kimber.
Next up is Lauren Reeg, R-E-E-G.
Okay, Lauren.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Lauren. I'm an associate with RMI, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization whose mission is to transform the global energy system to secure a clean and prosperous future. We commend the Council on Climate Solutions for their work putting together these recommendations. Today, I'd like to focus my comments on the recommendations associated with buildings, a critical sector to achieve Governor Whitmer's ambitious carbon neutrality goals. Michigan has made progress reducing emissions associated from the electricity consumption in buildings, but it has more work to do addressing the emissions associated with building materials and the fossil fuels combusted in buildings. For this reason, we're supportive of the Building Working Group's recommendations to prioritize electrification, efficiency, funding and financing, workforce development, and building codes. I'd like to especially emphasize 4 key points for Eagle's consideration. First are comprehensive retrofits. Deep energy retrofits of existing buildings are critical, as 70% of all buildings today will exist in 2050. To ensure equitable access to healthy, affordable buildings, we must dramatically accelerate the rate of building retrofits. A whole home retrofit provides 4 basic measures: health and safety, weatherization and efficiency, appliance electrification, and energy assistance measures. The state should use the policies under the efficiency, electrification, and financing recommendations in the building work to further comprehensive retrofits. Second, address future of gas. Governor Whitmer's executive goal requiring an economy-wide carbon neutrality by 2050 clearly indicates that Michigan's pathway to achieving its emission reduction goals will result in significant declines in utility gas throughput. Absent mitigating steps by the Commission, declining throughput on the gas distribution system poses significant financial risk to ratepayers, utilities, and utility employees. To mitigate these risks, the Commission must address the future of gas infrastructure in a regulatory process. Third, embodied carbon. Embodied emissions are an important component of building decarbonization that very few have heard of, but consist of 11% of global emissions. We support Michigan implementing a buy clean policy that can be found in the energy intensive industry working group recommendations. However, we recommend a faster implementation schedule.
1 minute.
For example, the buy clean recommendations could be staggered, with the first year including voluntary disclosure only followed by a 2-year data collection period. Colorado recently passed the Global Warming Potential Public Project Materials Law, which could be a useful guide. And finally, new construction. To decarbonize Michigan in a cost-effective manner, all new construction must be zero emissions. Building new inefficient and gas-dependent buildings would effectively lock in emissions or require a near-term retrofit. With that, we support Michigan passing 2021 IECC and all electric building codes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm done.
Thank you, Lauren. That was exactly 3 minutes. All right, who's the next one?
Next up is Sandra Lupian.
All right, Sandra, looking for you. Okay, you should be able to make your comment now.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thanks so much. I'm Sandra Lupian, and I serve as the Director of Mass Timber at MSU. Mass Timber at MSU is a collaboration across Michigan State University's Department of Forestry, School of Planning, Design, and Construction, and the Extension, with funding from Michigan DNR and MDARD. We work to mobilize communications, outreach, research, and education to support the adoption and manufacture of sustainable mass timber in Michigan. When I talk about mass timber, I'm talking about a variety of engineered wood panelized building construction products that can be made from a variety of wood products harvested from Michigan forests and forests elsewhere, as well as from salvaged wood. And these products can displace steel or concrete in the built environment, leading to lower embodied carbon footprints for buildings and buildings that can store carbon within their structural system. So very exciting stuff. Mass timber, I'm pleased to say, is covered in 2 of the sets of recommendations that we're talking about today. First, in building and housing, section 5, recommendation number 3. This looks at mass timber on the demand side. And what I mean by that is using more mass timber in Michigan buildings. These recommendations would facilitate that use. And I urge the continued consideration and inclusion of these recommendations to the final version of the recommendations adopted later in 2022. Specifically starting with the state's early adoption of the 14 mass timber elements contained in the 2021 International Building Code. This is a critical next step, among several others, to advance mass timber construction in Michigan. On the supply side, when we talk about mass timber, we're talking about a material that can provide a new and high value added use for sustainably harvested Michigan wood. And this is an exciting opportunity to advance sustainable forest management in Michigan, as well as put Michiganders to work in forestry jobs, in manufacturing jobs for mass timber, and in new building construction jobs. Recommendations related to supply side mass timber are covered in the natural and working lands recommendations in a variety of different ways. And I just urge a close look at those recommendations and a work toward adopting those recommendations in their complete form. And finally, our program Mass Timber at MSU is here to help the governor's office, Eagle, and other state agencies as they develop specific initiatives to support the adoption and manufacture of mass timber in Michigan. And there's my timer. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment.
I can't stop it.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up.
Next up is Marlene Bromer.
Okay, Marlene, you should be able to make your comment now.
All right, here I am. Thank you very much for this excellent session and all the knowledgeable people. I'm a county commissioner in the Upper Peninsula, and I just wanted some help in tracking down what I found out from our representative, Greg Markkinen, last week, that DNR had submitted a carbon sequestration, carbon credits sale program to this Natural Resources Committee in the House, and it was sent back directly to the DNR, was not accepted in any way, shape, or form. And I'm really worried about what this means. It doesn't seem that this committee has any plans for climate change solutions. And DNR has come up with an idea, and they were roundly sent back to their desks. So I put this in the question and answers, and anyone who has any ability or power to follow up on this, since I'm way in the UP, I'm not too familiar with the agencies downstate, but we'd appreciate your help, and thank you very much for this seminar. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Marlene. And looks like we got your name here down, so let's see if we can get back with you. And Jane, just by the way, I did notice there's a couple of people asking about your PowerPoint presentation, if that can be made available. Can we share that or not? What's the?
We will be able to share that. We've kind of given a couple of different versions of it, but we'll post one of them onto the website, the one that kind of contains the most useful information. But appreciate that. We'll make sure we follow up with that.
All right, thanks. Okay, Kimber, who we got next?
Next up is Melissa Sargent.
Okay, Melissa.
Hi, this is Melissa Cooper Sargent. I am a Detroit resident, and I also work for the Ecology Center. And I want to echo some of what some other folks have said about prioritizing EJ communities. We know that climate change will affect the most vulnerable the hardest. So we need policies that will make it easier for people to build solar and prioritize low income and environmental justice communities. We also need to help people weatherize their homes and prepare for the changes that are coming. We need to expand access to convenient zero emissions public transit and develop a statewide plan to increase non-motorized mobility. We also need to keep in mind that nature has some of the best solutions to climate change, and we need to protect Michigan's forests by focusing forest maintenance plans on efforts to increase ecological health and set a goal to protect 30% of Michigan's forests by 2030. And of course, wetlands are very important. We need to protect existing wetlands and waterways and establish a moratorium on destruction of these wetlands and use existing state planning processes to encourage the preservation and restoration of wetlands. Regarding environmental justice, we need we need to require state agencies to conduct an EJ analysis of climate impacts using an EJ screen that establishes a baseline of emissions and cumulative impacts. The cumulative impacts are very important because those are not taken into consideration currently when we're looking to build new asphalt factories and other sort of factories that emit emissions. We need to regularly measure progress on pollution reductions in EJ communities. To prioritize EJ communities and directly reduce energy burden and emissions in communities of color and low and moderate income communities, including specific goals to deploy clean energy resources and mitigation efforts in frontline communities like the Justice 40 initiative. And lastly, we need to use the influx of federal dollars to prioritize jobs training programs, resiliency investments, and other investments in vulnerable and historically underinvested communities. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Next up.
Megan Owens.
Okay, Megan, you can go ahead.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, and hopefully my dog won't be making too much noise. Yes, my name is Megan Owens. I'm the Executive Director of Transportation Riders United, a Detroit-based nonprofit group that's worked for the last 20 years to ensure that everyone has access to the places that they need to go, regardless of whether they drive. And so, I mean, I'm proud to have been able to work with the Transportation and Mobility Workgroup, and that group really developed some very strong recommendations that I think, as you noted, transportation is the largest sector, the largest contributor of greenhouse gas pollution. And it's important to note that it is not on the decline. The energy sector is moving in the right direction. The transportation sector is not yet. Electric vehicles are going to be a critical part of the solution. And there's no doubt that two of the centerpieces of this plan really need to be renewable energy and electric vehicles. But I think it's really important that a broader set are fully embraced, and especially things that can that really provide a whole lot of secondary benefits. I'm glad you guys noted at the beginning that that looking at both the justice and equity components of the recommendations of this plan. I strongly encourage that the last recommendation on your chart there can really get a high emphasis, that of making it easier for people to get around without driving. A lot of people would very much like to not have to be driving everywhere they need to go, would like to not have to put so much into their gas tank. But the way so much of Michigan has been developed over the last century, or at least the last few decades, makes it extremely difficult for most people to get around. So a high priority in this plan should really be, let's at least give people choices of ways to get around that don't require personal cars. A major expansion in public transportation, a major effort to make it safer and easier to walk and bike around many of our communities. These are things that are absolutely doable, that are within the administration's, largely within the administration's control, but they will require some changes from the status quo. We'll have to challenge MDOT's decades of almost pure focus on building and maintaining roads, and really stretch their vision to look at how can they get people around sustainably and affordably, with or without personal cars. These things can be done. They would provide great benefits. They would help many families across Michigan save thousands of dollars, make our communities more attractive for both seniors and young professionals, and be a huge benefit for low-income communities. But
hey, Megan, that's about 3 minutes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Again, if you have more comments, anybody, Kimber did put in the chat the email addresses for submitting written comments to different work groups. So please, if you have additional information or comments, please send them to that email address. Appreciate it.
Will do. Thank you.
Oh, okay, Kimber, who's up next?
Up next is Richard Barron.
All right, Richard, go ahead.
Hi, this is Richard Barron. I'm from Ann Arbor. I've submitted some written suggestions of things that I think that the state ought to be doing. But I wanted to make today just a couple of what I consider to be big picture thoughts. First, I would like to laud and applaud the Whitmer administration, Eagle, and the council, and indeed the people calling in today for these hearings, for starting to actually get things going, and for beginning with, generally speaking, specific and concrete things that can and must be done. I start with the point that we have a rapidly escalating planetary crisis. It's coming at us. We would have had difficulty dealing with it starting 20 years ago, but we're starting way late, so we need to move fast. I think we can and we must make big changes to do this, but it's only going to work if we do it at all levels and at all points, and with a commitment that dealing with climate change is not and cannot be a partisan issue. I think also that while this is a planetary crisis and we have to deal with it at a global issue, it's also true that we have to deal with it on an individual basis. And as far as the state of Michigan is concerned, its plans and programs ought, in my judgment, to enlist and encourage citizens all over the state in their own way to make changes in their own personal lifestyle that will advance and support the actions which the Michigan government, state government is doing. Someone else mentioned Professor Hawkins' drawdown suggestions, and I think presumably the council members are familiar with that, and that many of those existing technologies and approaches are doable both at the governmental level and the individual level. Indeed, I think that addressing climate change will take not only state and federal government, but also the business community and civil society. And I think if we all understand the imminency and seriousness of the threat, we're going to be able to work together to do it, but we will have to act immediately on all fronts from all sides of the problem. Thank you for your hearings.
All right, thank you, sir. Next.
Next up is Tim Powers.
Okay, I'm looking for Tim Powers, and this time I don't see him in attendance. So if Tim Powers, if you're logged in under somebody else's name or something like that, you're going to need to raise your hand and we'll come back to you later. So who's after Tim?
Anthony Mazurek.
Anthony. I am not seeing an Anthony Mazurek in attendance today. Who's up after Anthony?
Sorry, it's another Anthony Pachorek.
Not seeing an Anthony. How do you spell last name? Is it with a P?
Yes, it's Paciorek.
Yes, I do not see Anthony. Oh, no, there he is. I see him now. Sorry. Okay, Anthony, you can go ahead. Should be able to unmute your line.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for taking the opportunity to hold these public hearing sessions, and hopefully you take to heart the great suggestions that we're hearing so far. My name is Anthony Pachorek. I am an environmental justice organizer with Michigan United out of Flint, Michigan. It's rather disheartening that we see such tone deafness from Eagle regarding matters of environmental justice sensitivity and frontline communities. I know that photo. That's along the Flint River. I walked there during the fall. So to see that, and in that context, especially when Eagle had every opportunity to shut down an Ajax air permit and hasn't, it's disheartening. I can't really take consideration that you're going to take this really serious with that tone deafness. But I'm going to comment on a few things with my remaining time. One, we're talking about issues that need to be resolved in order to get us to a better net carbonization of zero and lower energy emissions in the state. We need the removal of our 1% solar cap tax on rooftop. That's really going to limit a lot of our development and ability to create those solar and green jobs, especially in priority communities of environmental justice communities like my own, right? So we need to remove that. There's a bill, HB 4236. There was a person on before me who talked about Rep. Markennan, and he actually is involved heavily on that bill, and we've worked with him. And we are trying to push for Rep. Bellino to remove that. He's on the Energy Council and he's refusing to hold it to a vote. So we need to hold our elected leaders accountable, right, and get them out of that positions where they're blocking that. So secondly, Flint and other environmental justice impacted cities like Benton Harbor and Detroit are seeing the brunt of these developments for progress, but we are not receiving any of the benefits, nor have we received benefits or restoration or anything really other than pollution in our neighborhoods. And I'm really concerned with Eagle's lack of concern of really holding themselves about accountability on that. But also if we did want to really like make a positive impact, we would make solar fields in these brownfields of these developed urban areas, as well as we'd give scholarship training programs to STEM programs relating around energy and solar development. Flint has an excellent automotive and engineering base, as well as like 5 universities. There's no reason that these can't come back to our community. So again, I'm just really disappointed in hearing a lot of what Eagle is saying, unless they have some serious intention of making deliverable progress and holding themselves accountable. Thank you. I yield my remaining time to the next person.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Who's up next, Kimber?
Next up is Tyler Penrod.
I'm not seeing Tyler in attendance right now, so who's up next?
James Sherman.
And I do not see James here in attendance.
Next after James is Brandy Crawford Johnson.
No Brandy either.
Barbara Carr.
I'm not seeing Barbara in attendance either. Just to let everybody know, what we're doing right now, if you came in late, is that we're going to list of people who, when they pre-register, they indicated they wanted to comment, and after we do that, we'll go back to people, and if you didn't pre-register, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. So
After Barbara is Margaret Mandevos.
okay, Margaret is here, and Margaret, you should be able to go ahead.
Hello, my name is Margaret Mandevos, and I live in Saline, Michigan. I'm a registered nurse, and I actually love that you guys are having this seminar online. And I'm thanking all the people that are working full-time to change things. And the reason I wanted to comment is because when I put a new roof on my house last year, I wanted to put solar in. And looking at the cost benefit over the years, I'll be 70 this month, it was not really worth it for me. And I was very disappointed that I couldn't do that. I'm just making comments as a citizen, individual citizen. I also, so that was a problem. And I hope that really changes to where it does become affordable for people like me. The second thing I want to comment on is all my neighbors use pesticides on their lawn. And I'm appalled. I have a huge vegetable garden and I don't spray. I leave the dandelions for all the bees and insects in the spring. And I hope that everybody tells their neighbors. I finally got my neighbor next door after 15 years to stop using that crap. So, and I hope everyone, I think just, it's really hard as an individual to make changes except in your yard or your home or your car you drive. And the other thing that I have a concern about is the lithium batteries. I discussed that with I have an old car that I drive, and I was thinking about getting alternative energy car, but my concern is with the lithium batteries. I understand that the lithium is not recyclable, and that's a big concern for people like me. I have an old Subaru that I drive. So That's just the comments I wanted to make, and I hope that we can move forward with this. And just to let you all know, I have been in contact, like when working as a nurse with elders, I did call around to all the state senators, including everybody. And I also called Mitch McConnell's office when they were trying to cut back on Medicaid. But I also asked people about, climate. What?
You have 1 minute left?
Okay, on climate change. And when I called Tim Wahlberg's office, this is a number of years ago, I was told that he doesn't believe in climate change. So I wrote him a letter. I heard back from him. And I think that all of us can call, and I have a letter from him that he wrote. I don't think he really copped to climate change, but he said he had to worry about business. So I hope everybody reaches out to their state senators and everybody else who's making decisions for us, because as an individual, I find it very difficult to make changes. So we do have to hold people that are elected accountable. And that's my comment. And thank you again, everybody, for all the hard work that you're doing. We really do need to make some changes. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Okay, who's up next?
Shayton Dockery.
I do not see Shayton in attendance.
Then is Tawny Gapinski. Gapinski.
Yeah, I do not see a Tawny in attendance either.
Okay, the last one on my list of those who indicated they would like to speak is William Patterson.
Okay, I do not see William Patterson here in attendance. And just to let you know, so these are people that registered and said they wanted to comment. And yeah, so they just may not be in attendance. Maybe they're going to be here tomorrow. Okay, so Kimber, you said that was the last person on the list of people who pre-registered and said they wanted to comment?
Yes, that's the last person on the list of those who pre-registered, and I just checked our email box too and don't see any there.
Okay. All right then. Well, what we can do now is we can go to people that weren't on the list and would like to comment. So just a reminder, if you'd like to comment, you can raise your hand and we'll go through you, go to you and read off your name and have you unmute your mic when it happens. By the way, if you are on the phone, it doesn't look like we have any people I just called in on the phone, but if for some reason you are on the phone and I don't see you and you're on the phone only, then you hit #2. If you hit #2, that'll raise your hand for us and we can unmute your line that way. We'll call your telephone number instead of your name. That's what we can see. All right, so what I'm going to do is start going through some of these names of people who have their hands raised. And the first one is Janet Zahn. So Janet, you can go ahead and make your comment.
Thank you. My name is Janet Zahn, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Grand Rapids Climate Coalition. Thank you very much for the opportunity to listen and to comment on state efforts to deal with climate change. Our group is referenced by Alison Sutter. Thank you, Alison, for all the work that you're doing with the city to move us forward and take a leadership role on how we can get to carbon neutrality sooner than later. Our coalition consists of 60 member groups and is growing. Organizations that all support this effort. So we are definitely lobbying hard to our city. And we know that a lot of what stands in the way is barriers that come at the state level. So with that regard, the building code for all future construction really needs to change and reflect that buildings should go to net zero. And then also supporting a comment made earlier about retrofitting. And I feel like that particularly addresses some of the equity focus because our our frontline BIPOC communities are those who probably aren't going out and building new buildings, and the homes that they live in deserve to also be clean and energy efficient. So working on all of those efforts to quickly advance energy efficiency and getting to net zero electrification of buildings is very important. And then, of course, removing the barriers to broad solar implementation. The solar caps got to go, and the state needs to just go all in on building the infrastructure within the grid and helping support communities who would like to move swiftly in that regard. I think the other thing that I want to say is it's important that we're prepared to accept any of the federal infrastructure money that's coming our way and put it to use for green infrastructure. And I think that Eagle can be helpful in that by advocating for and putting in plans in place for making use of such things. I thank you for this time and continue doing this work, please.
All right, thanks for your comment. Next up is Ann Pauley. And you should be able to make your comment now.
I actually was one of the first to comment.
Oh, I apologize. That's
It's
right.
all right.
I have your hand raised here too, so I missed that. All right, so we'll just go to the next person. Thank you. Aaron Viles.
Hi, folks. This is Aaron Viles. I'm with the Electrification Coalition. We're a nonprofit organization focused on speeding the deployment of electric vehicles. We work in Michigan, are very committed to supporting efforts such as those you've laid out. I wanted to just send congratulations to all who worked on this, these recommendations, found them to be thoughtful and very much in keeping and in alignment with other work going on in the state, specifically the Council on Future Mobility and Electrification. So nice to see the alignments there, specifically with a clean fuel standard or a low carbon fuel standard, which as we look at the need to electrify and shift our transportation sector from fossil fuels to electricity, it's going to take significant investments to build the infrastructure necessary. We can start the process quickly. Eagle has had some, I think, wonderful programs that should continue on EVSE support through the Volkswagen funds. I know that those will run out. I think there will be other opportunities at the federal level. I hope everyone's paying very close attention to what's being decided at the federal level, because it'll be really critical to supporting these efforts that you've kind of outlined as goals. One thing I did want to encourage Eagle to do as you think about those programs is to make the kind of internal commitments to lead from the front. And I know that Michigan is, obviously the auto state and supports local automakers. You've got a lot to choose from. And, with new folks entering the space as well, folks like Rivian with their, kind of EV only approach. But, what is being rolled out by the big three also should be looked at in terms of fleet acquisitions. So I'd love to see Eagle making a commitment to match what the big three have said, or at least two of the big three have said, which I think is 100% by 2040 of their light duty vehicles. But we've got to start that process now. There's some wonderful vehicles that are available for Eagle to bring into their fleet. And I would encourage you guys to make internal commitments to that, or public commitments rather, for your fleet electrification. Otherwise, I think the goals you've set up, I think are very solid and are important. I like the idea of the transportation electrification kind of plan to make sure that we got everyone moving in the right direction here. So with that, I'd just like to say thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for the work that you've all done, to make this document, these goals, share them publicly, and we look forward to working with you to accomplish them.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Let's see here. Next up, we've got Todd Scott.
Thank you. My name is Todd Scott. I am the Executive Director for the Detroit Greenways Coalition. And I was also on the Transportation and Mobility Workgroup. I did want to comment that, transportation used to be zero emissions, but with the advent of fossil fuels, it really lighted the fire for energy inefficient transportation, and that was heavily government subsidized. My concern is that some of the recommendations of our work group continues to subsidize energy inefficient transportation. And we've seen it in some of the recommendations in the other group, like the buildings group, talking about how do we make our houses more energy efficient. We don't have that same language or same push within the transportation group. I think that's an oversight. EVs are going to shift some of their carbon emissions to other sectors, which I don't think is accounted for as well, in terms of shifting them to energy production and also into manufacturing. If we look at the amount of carbon emissions by transportation type, by foot, of course, is 0. By bike is actually 8 due to the manufacturing of the bicycle. And electric vehicles are at 99, which is only 50% less than regular gasoline vehicles, which are 210 grams of carbon per kilometer. So we really like to see more emphasis on biking and walking. And I understand that the auto industry is very important to Michigan, but we really should acknowledge that if we're going to push EVs and not push biking and walking as hard, we need to acknowledge that we're overlooking the best practices for reducing our carbon emissions. I know it's hard to change from a political standpoint and from the status quo, but we need to at least acknowledge it, because I have a feeling that this plan is not going to get us to where we need to be because it's not bold enough yet. And so we need to lay the groundwork for the next plan going forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Todd. Okay, next up is Mindy Miner. Mindy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great. I just want to, first of all, thank you for all the work that you've done. But I also want to look at this all from a bigger picture. These are great suggestions that everyone's had today, but everything would be so much easier and easier to implement if fossil fuels were more expensive. So I would like to suggest that the state of Michigan join with the other Great Lakes states in putting a price on greenhouse gas emissions. This is something that should be done at the federal level. It's being highly considered at the moment, but it looks unlikely to pass. So many people are recommending that states take up the banner. And there's some really good models out there, like RGGI on the East Coast, a coalition of East Coast states. So I think that would be great for Michigan to do that in the Great Lakes region. And I know it makes things more expensive for people, but the money that's collected from the fees could then either be put into renewable energy projects for low-income neighborhoods or directly returned to the people. For example, I chair the Rockford Sustainability Committee here in Rockford, and it's so hard to try to convince people to electrify when natural gas is so cheap. So I think this would be a solutions multiplier, and I'd really like to see the state consider that. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Mindy. Got several people here still with their hand up, so I'm just going through them as they come on. Kate Madigan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Good morning. My name is Kate Madigan. I'm the Executive Director of the Michigan Climate Action Network, and I want to thank the Council, the work groups, and the Governor for her ambitious climate goals, including for Michigan to be carbon neutral by 2050, which science makes clear we must do to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So the Governor's goal is necessary. We know it is achievable, and we know it will be hard. And a lot will have to change, as others have mentioned, and there will be resistance to this. So as challenging as it will be to achieve this goal, failing to do what is necessary will be far worse. Last year in 2020, the largest extreme weather events alone resulted in over $100 billion in damages in the United States, and hundreds lost their lives. So I also want to point out what I think most of us know, that the reason it will be so hard to achieve these emission cuts that are necessary is because we have waited so long to act. We now have plenty of evidence that fossil fuel companies and industry groups intentionally misled the public and spent millions of dollars influencing policymakers to take no action on climate for many decades. So as we head into the final weeks of developing this action plan, we cannot let special interests water it down and weaken the impact of the governor's commitment. To achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, we know that we need to electrify everything and decarbonize the grid. Since cars and furnaces can last up to 15 years, we need to be selling all electric by 2035. And we need this plan to be equitable. So the climate plan at its core must include the following: a 100% zero carbon electricity standard by 2035 that does not rely on false solutions like carbon offsets. It needs to have a goal for all new light vehicles sold to be electric vehicles by 2035, and expanded access to convenient zero emissions public transportation. It needs a goal and a plan for all new heating equipment to be electric by 2035, and to fund weatherization programs, especially for low and moderate income households. The plan needs to require state agencies to conduct an EJ analysis and look at cumulative impacts, and to regularly measure the progress on pollution reduction in EJ communities, and also for EJ communities to be prioritized for investments in clean energy and climate resiliency. And also, the plan must require state agencies to consider climate change in all decisions, including decisions to build new oil infrastructure. We also need to be doing the modeling and measuring to ensure we're meeting the carbon reduction targets that the governor has set out. So I will follow up with more detailed recommendations in writing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kate. Okay, next up is Anthony Skinnell.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, good morning, everyone. Michigan Eagle, so nice to talk to you. I'm joining you from Detroit today, and I'm just a citizen. I'm not really with any group, but I've had a chance to look over the recommendations by the different working groups, and I think there's some interesting stuff in there. I like particularly the point, maintain and develop healthy forest areas and public land. And kind of here in Wayne County, we don't really have we have some metro parks and the International Wildlife Refuge, but I'm just kind of concerned with pollution in general, in a way, especially with our waterways, and some of our public lands and forests here are really just along the streams, like the Rouge River or the Ecorse Creek. It's just real limited forest. So that's something I'm concerned with here, and the enforcement Eagle does in this area, particularly the heavily industrialized area. I mean, I don't know if you guys have cops on the beat, but I think you should have Eagle people all throughout this really sensitive industrialized Rouge River area every day, just taking samples, testing, doing the sniff test, doing whatever they got to do to enforce what needs to be enforced with these factories. And so, yeah, I think that's great. I liked the part about making more financing available for individuals, because it's like the other lady said from Saline, it's just hard to get solar. It's a perception that it's a niche thing and it's expensive. And that's why I'm really not in favor of anything that really emphasizes the burden on the consumer. It just gives the perception, that in tackling climate change, we're going to lower our quality of life standard. And I don't think that's a winning message to pass across. And, furthermore, it just kind of sounds Malthusian to me. I think we need to raise our quality of living in this endeavor. So I don't know what, how that can be addressed, but
1 minute.
That's messaging. 1 minute. Thank you. And so I hope we don't have a failure of imagination here. And, there's so much, honestly, there's a lot more that could be just like, a lot more that could be done with, I mean, I understand this is like a scientific approach, but obviously it's going to require social changes. And I think this document represents a failure in imagination of our ability to socially change around this issue, because it's going to take social changes. So, and that being said too, please also put more emphasis on public transit. I think that's woefully underaddressed in this document. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Anthony. All right, next person up is John Mcgarry. John?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Good, thank you. I want to thank you, Eagle, and all the people that have put this program together. I think it's really a very good program, and I relish the opportunity to make some comments. I'm impressed by all of the comments of the people. I would point out Alison Sutter. I want to also support the comments by Mindy Miner and Kate Madigan. I think they are all significant. By the way, I'm a resident of Ada, Michigan, and I'm active in several environmental organizations. I think my time with the environment goes way back in the 1970s. At the time, the Republicans were the ones who were driving the progress in the environment, like salt change and stuff. But a couple of points I wanted to make is that the solar cap needs to come off. Eagle can't do that, but that's a political issue, and I know that. The other thing that's really important, I think, is community solar. And that's really would be very helpful for the environmental justice communities, and probably also for the indigenous people. Those are really interesting. The other thing I would suggest is wondered if Eagle would consider an outside group which would do a program. I know in the state of Washington they had a organization called Energy Innovation to do a significant pathways to carbon neutrality in 2050, and they had adopted that and they moved ahead on that. That might be something that would help Eagle to put together a cogent pathway to get to solar, to get to carbon neutral by 2050. The other thing is about the cost of solar and wind, and that is that I understand that the financial communities are. Thank you. The financial communities are investing heavily in clean energy, and they're not financing fossil fuels as they were. So I think that there's also opportunities in the finance area for people that don't have the money to buy the solar and things like that. But that would be a way in which we can facilitate solar panels and also community solar in the inner cities. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I thank you for all of the things that you've been doing to get us to net zero at 2050. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Next up is Sanaya Gant Jordan.
Yes, hi. Thank you again for what you're doing. My name is Saini. It's not Sanaya. And I am with the Community Collaboration on Climate Change, the C4 team in Grand Rapids. I would just like to bring it a little closer to home as I share with you today concerns that I have around this proposal. I do not see this. I'm dealing with some trust issues here right now. I've taken many of your classes with Eagles, your webinars, and thank you for those. They have been very educational for me. But when it comes to communities of colors, and I am a Black female small business owner, and I did allow, we're trying to educate ourselves on how we can help our Black communities reduce their carbon footprint in their homes and in their businesses. But I allowed DTE Energy to come into my home last month. Well, on one of my properties, wasn't where I live, but I was occupying the space, to put the meter on outside. So they went into my basement and put the meter, take the meter and install it on the outside so they can have access to the reading. But then they left the gas exposed. And right now I'm dealing with sickness because of it. This is another trust issue in our Black community. So when we talk about reducing carbon footprints and helping lower these energy bills and installing solar panels and all these other great things that the white community is talking about, when it comes to our Black community, we are treated very badly. So I'm wondering what risk measurements are put in place, because right now I'm dealing with something that I shouldn't have to deal with because I trusted a utility company to come in and do what they say they need to do to help lower the carbon emissions. So I would like to see something in here that helps hold, will hold these utility companies accountable for the mistreatment that they do in the underserved communities. There's a lot of talk in this pamphlet about the underserved communities, but I don't see it, it's not helping build trust. And I think that is something that needs to happen if we're going to move this thing forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to our next commenter, Mark Cornwell.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Mark Cornwell. I live in Holly Township and served 14 years as a planning commissioner here in our township. I'm really excited about the movement to renewables. Actually, I did just install a solar array at my home about 3 months ago. But one of the things that I'm concerned about is that we have a tendency to overlook some of the lower hanging fruit. And essentially, we have archaic building and zoning ordinances, in my opinion, that create nice little cookie cutter layouts and subdivisions that have absolutely no regard for using passive solar, and for other aspects to modify our homes to be more energy efficient. Actually, I'm happy to say I've actually helped the economy because I had a number of people out here installing the solar panels this summer, and I'm happy to say I have window installers coming to install new windows in my home later this month, actually. So I would have to say I've probably done more to reduce my own carbon footprint here at my home through things like building an attached solarium to my home, by building an enclosed porch, by proper planting of trees and windbreakers and things of that nature that reduce the environmental impacts on my needs for energy and heating my home or cooling my home. And last, what else was I thinking? Well, that would suffice actually. But I'm happy to do what I can, and I'm happy to hear that this program is taking place. And I'm sorry that I haven't read the plan yet, but I will certainly do so and comment back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A couple more hands up here. Kirk Westfall.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for this great session. I have a comment about zoning reform. I was hopeful that both the housing and transportation groups would have recommended that cities, either on their own accord or through state legislation, would be required to change their antiquated zoning laws. These largely local laws prevent oftentimes higher density housing from being built in job-rich areas or near transit. And these laws also almost universally subsidize driving through requirements like minimum parking. Recently, thanks to books like The Color of Law, most of these zoning rules we know now originated with the clear purpose of pricing minorities out of cities. And they are still having this effect, although most of that language has been scrubbed from ordinances. We can still see the segregationist effects economically and racially. So this has even gotten attention from the Biden administration in a recent white paper about exclusionary zoning. So specifically, states like California and Oregon have passed legislation to require that their cities change their zoning rules so that home builders can provide new, much lower carbon footprint and car light housing options near job and transit locations. This has included legislation like allowing smaller homes, which a previous commenter referenced, removing prohibitions on multifamily home construction, and eliminating the racist single-family zoning restrictions that are commonly found in almost all of our cities. Other legislation has focused on permitting apartment-style housing without parking requirements along transit lines.
1 minute.
So this has been a politically charged issue in the states that have undergone this, but the good news is that it's revenue positive. Cities can deliver services more efficiently when density increases. People have more affordable housing options and transportation options, and it's extremely beneficial in supporting transit service. It makes no sense to expand transit options when cities are working at cross purposes and not allowing new housing to be located where people can access that transit. So in summary, land use policy is housing policy, is transportation policy, is climate policy. I also give a +1 for the commenter who highlighted the need for carbon pricing and carbon dividends. Thanks so much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks for your comments. Okay, next person with their hand up is Megan Owens.
Hi, I commented earlier. I want to see if it's okay to make 2 more additional comments. Now that I'm not wrestling my dog at the same time.
I'm sorry, Megan, I missed the first part of your comment. It broke up.
Oh, I commented at the beginning. Is it okay? And I wanted to see if it was okay to add an additional comment at this point.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot you had commented earlier. So if you want to take just a minute or
sure. Yeah, I wanted to echo 2 comments that have been made, both what Kirk just said about land use. I guess it didn't really fit into any of the categories, but eliminating parking minimums and allowing for higher density, those are critically important and really do need to be added into these recommendations. And similarly, as I think it was Todd mentioned, the transportation group did discuss walking and biking, and one of the sort of secondary recommendations that didn't make it into the top 5, I think really should be elevated into this core set, and that's making it easier to walk and bike. If people feel unsafe getting out of their cars, then we are forcing them to drive and to pollute. So these are not expensive, but are hugely important solutions that will make it easier. First thing we need to do is stop making it so hard to live a green lifestyle, to walk, to use transit, to live in a high density area. That really does, those pieces really do need to be incorporated into the recommendations. So thank you again for all of the efforts you're making. There's a lot of great stuff in here. Those are two pieces that really should be added in that are not in there now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Okay, I got two more people with their hands up right now. So next one is Charles Tazia.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I have not read the entire document, but I plan to, but I just wanted to make a few comments. Definitely in favor of adopting 100% zero carbon energy standard by 2035. The price of, obviously the price of wind and solar keeps coming down, and between the technological advances and the economy of scale, that's supposed to keep happening. So there's really no reason not to do it, really, other than the pressure we're getting maybe from the oil and gas companies to slow that down. So definitely in favor of that. Also very much in favor of carbon pricing or carbon taxes, because I've studied this a bit for my job, and all the experts that I've read on the economic side say that that's going to be an essential piece to actually making this real and making it happen. So I think we need to implement that, preferably at a federal level, but we all know that's a pretty hard road these days. So perhaps we can get something at the state level to start incentivizing this transition. Also being able to have people generate their own renewable power, making it more affordable to install solar or wind on our own property would be beneficial. In the area of transportation and mobility, I just made the leap and ordered an electric vehicle. It's a little scary, but and it's expensive, but we spent a lot of money causing this problem. We're gonna have to spend money to fix it, and I have to do my part. So that's why I did it. But to incentivize that and make it easier to do, I think would speed this transition up. Making these vehicles a bit more affordable, I think would be a helpful thing. But I think mass transit, a few people have mentioned that's a really big deal, especially right now, because we got kind of this really strange economic time in the country, and a lot of people are really struggling. And if we could get some zero emission public transportation, and it's tough in Michigan, because we're the car capital of the world, right? But we need to evolve. And if we did this, I think it would kill multiple birds with one stone. It would help us with our emissions, and it also help make things easier for the people who are struggling economically, because vehicle ownership is super expensive, even with the changes in the car insurance that we saw a few years ago. With regard to buildings and housing, again, thinking about the lower income people, I've done what I can to weatherize my house and make it efficient, but there's a cost to that. And, there's a big upfront cost and a long payback time, but it's really important. And frankly, low income folks just simply can't afford to do those things. So they need help to do those things. And again, it helps them because it puts more money back in their pocket, and it helps us collectively. In terms of our lands, I believe that our wetlands are super, super important, especially we're not seeing sea level rise here in Michigan because we're not in the ocean, but we've seen a lot of the damages from high water levels in the last few years, and it's helped mitigate that. So we need to protect. Thank you. And just focusing on the 30 by 30 protection of land target for Michigan, 30% by 2030 can only help. And it helps not only climate change, but it helps our quality of life in the state for everybody. Everybody can get out there and enjoy it. So that's all I have. I appreciate the opportunity to share. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Charles. All right. The last person I have here with a hand up is Emily Baker. So Emily, you can go ahead.
Hello. Hi. This is Emily Baker, just a Michigan citizen, and I guess I'm basically repeating what everybody else said. I sent an email. I emailed a comment about the energy intensive to the energy intensive section. And I had noticed the carbon pricing section and wanted to recommend reaching out to the Citizens Climate Lobby, who had come up with a carbon dividend plan, and finding more information about that. I included the information about their website and Facebook page. And on top of that, I also want to add something that might be a contentious subject. I'm hoping that, and that's, I sincerely hope that the lowering prices of wind and solar energy and whatnot don't come at the cost of a reduction in the ethical treatment of the workers involved in making it. I hope you can advocate that they get treated fairly and have good working conditions and not be forced to put in unreasonable hours. And of course, I second protecting the Great Lakes and the wetlands, and probably also getting in touch with Flow, Oil and Water Don't Mix, and others that are involved with different pipelines running through the watershed, with combating the different pipelines running through the watershed, and possibly also finding a way to mitigate that, and also making things easy for the workers who believe that oil and gas and whatnot are all they know, helping ease the transition out of it. And I guess that's all I've got to say. All I've got to say.
Oh, okay, thanks, Emily, for your comment. And looks like we got one more person that, oh, here we go. Ellis Bull, a couple more people that put their hands up. So Ellis, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we
can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. I want to, Ellis Bull is my name. I'm from Northern Michigan. I'm an attorney. I was active in the ban fracking initiative, collected signatures. The most important thing to me is to identify the enemy here, and the enemy is the oil and gas industry. The last two speakers, Charles Tazia and Emily Baker, did mention that, but I want to emphasize the point of production of oil and gas is where to start. Michigan does produce oil and gas, mostly gas. It's about halfway up the scale among all the states that do produce oil and gas. I was successful at one point a few years ago of stopping some in Canada horizontal frac wells that would have been the largest in the United States. So sometimes it is possible through the current laws to take action. And I want to mention two items that I've already put into the hopper, and I think they still are in the hopper. Just briefly, first of all, the Council on Climate Solutions should recommend that Governor instruct AGL to begin to enforce the statutory prohibition of oil and gas waste by stopping the current practice of operators in Michigan's Antrim Shale, that's the northern part of the Lower Peninsula, which currently vent 1 million tons a year of produced climate warming CO2 to the atmosphere. Can you imagine that? Right now, Michigan operators are producing 1 million tons a year of climate change. I've written a paper about that. You can read it. This would be a direct hit against the oil and gas industry, which I think is necessary. Within my subgroup, the energy subgroup, everyone either fully supported it or one who supported it conditionally. That's a no-brainer. The other no-brainer would not involve implementing existing law, but rather involve a change in law. I'm going to read to you a part of Michigan current law. It's been on the book since 1939.
1 minute.
It's an embarrassment to the state. It says that the declared policy of the state is to maximize production of oil and gas and to foster the development of the oil and gas industry. That's written in our laws. That's an ideological position. It may have made some sense in 1939 when it was first passed, but it makes no sense today. That should be eliminated. That was part of our goal with the FRAC petition. The governor, of course, can't do that. It requires the legislature to do it together with her. But she could make that recommendation, and that's another no-brainer. These are point of production. These two proposals are point of production, and they're aiming straight at the enemy, the oil and gas industry, and we should be clear on who the enemy is. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks for your comment today. David Camps, got your hand raised, David?
Hi, Jim. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak here. I was a member of a few of these groups, and I was on UP Energy Task Force, and I am an engineer, former engineer, actually. I now run a small company in the UP for deploying renewable energy and energy conservation in residential and commercial buildings. But it's been quite a ride going through all this with the UP Energy Task Force, and this coming up with this plan and contributing to that has been exciting. And I heard a couple of comments in here that I like to comment on. Somebody said that this was going to be a burden. These changes could be a burden on people or something to that effect. But the changes as I see them are exciting. There's a lot of positive attributes to the changes that are required if implemented that would benefit the consumer, like, you know, having a 100 kilowatt hour battery in your garage that can power your house, or V2X type stuff, V2G kind of stuff. There is so many opportunities and benefits to electrifying the grid and moving forward with these recommendations. I think that we need to move forward on certain aspects of this. As Director Clark, I think, was the one that came up with catalyst communities. And I really think catalyzing these changes would be a nice way to go. And I think a way to do that is rapid deployment of EV charging stations, class 2, and the rapid charging would really promote or take the fear away, as one guy mentioned in here, of buying a new vehicle. And here in the UP, you buy a vehicle, you're not going to have a place to charge it except for your home or your business if you put it in yourself right now. That has to change, and I think that change will catalyze some of the rest of the change. And the other thing I see is that workforce development is, we're struggling with workforce right now. And with these kind of changes, you know, I'm very excited about the plan. I commend our leadership of coming up with this and the aggressive nature that they're doing. But coming up with a plan and executing that plan are a different story. So I'm a little worried about the execution and workforce development to institute.
Got 1 minute left.
Okay, thank you. I've been working with a couple of nonprofits trying to train their guys to install solar, and I'm going to continue doing that this year. And that's one of my concerns about this. How do we get these deployed when the plan is accepted? And I'm not sure what the timeline is for this stuff, but I think workforce development is going to be critical to the execution of this plan. And I appreciate you guys having these meetings, and thank you very much.
All right, thanks, David. Okay, is there anyone else that has not commented today that would like to make a comment? All right. So James, just a couple things to know. We had a couple people ask question about when the recording, if this is being recorded and where it's going to be available. Just to let you know, today's session, as well as the one we're hosting tomorrow night, they're both being recorded and they'll be posted to our YouTube channel as soon as we can get them up there. So you can expect to see them, I'd assume, by Friday or Monday. We'll have them up on our Eagle YouTube channel. And another person, James, was asking about, a couple people asked about the comments that came in. Are those going to be posted publicly or not? And I guess, I don't know if you had any other comments you'd like to make, James. Go ahead. Also, I think we might have, hold on a second. I think we might have lost James. I think, hold on a second. Okay. All right, James, you're back. I'm sorry about that. Okay, James, you're back. All right, sorry, you must have got moved to a different area. Sorry. Did you hear my the question that came in about the public, making them public, the comments?
Yeah, that is kind of under consideration at this point. Part of it is just a resource question. The recording will be posted, on the website, so people will be able to kind of watch the recording of the event. I believe we have done that in the past. Again, first I want to thank everyone, for taking the time, providing us comments. Really appreciate it. Took copious notes here, and hopefully we'll be able to incorporate as many as possible kind of into the final plan. Just want to mention, kind of Dave mentioned there right at the end, what comes next, what happens afterwards. And I think what we envision at Eagle is for all of the major recommendations, we will then transition immediately to implementation teams. State government, the executive branch of state government alone cannot tackle this problem. It's going to have to be in concert with, our partners at the federal level, our partners at the local level, individuals across the state, businesses, nonprofits. It's really going to be an all hands on deck. So again, we're going to be looking to immediately transition to making sure it happens and being accountable. A couple of mentions of accountability, and we have some resources coming on board here that's going to help us kind of do some carbon emission tracking in the state of Michigan. So we'll have a dashboard that we can keep track of, the progress we're making in this various areas. We think that is very important. The governor is very focused on, her term in office. What can she do, going in the next year? And if reelected, what might she be able to do in a second term? So really looking at, what do we need to get on track in the next, 5 years if we're going to achieve these longer term goals. So we're very much kind of interested in that this is not going to be a plan that just sits on the shelf. We see that being a living document that is revisited and updated on a regular basis as we learn more about, implementation. As technology changes, we're seeing kind of changes in the electric vehicle space and in some of the, other transportation options of looking at, what's going to be best practices. How has COVID changed the world? With less people going into the workplace, how is that going to change commuting patterns and things like that? So we want to be nimble and kind of take into consideration things as they develop and do science as it develops. So again, we'll have another listening session tomorrow, but then look for a draft plan coming out right around the, the beginning of the year. That's where, after a couple of more discussions with our Council on Climate Solutions, we'll be kind of putting the document together and really be looking for input on that plan kind of going forward. So again, thanks everyone for participating today, and look forward to kind of hearing from you in the future.
All right, thanks, James. Just want to remind you all that in the chat, there's the links to all the email addresses that if you want to submit additional comments, that's where you can submit them in writing. Also, I would like to thank everyone for being respectful today and limiting their comments to 3 minutes. You all did a great job. We had a lot of comments to listen to, and we still got 57 people logged in, and we had, I think, at one point 90 some. So good to see so many of you staying on. Reminder that tomorrow night is a second comment session we've got, listening session. It'll be just like this one, where we're just going to be listening to comments after James's the same presentation. And that one is at 6 o'clock tomorrow night. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.